As a professional in any field, one of your fundamental duties is to promote the rights of all individuals, and that encompasses children's rights. Even if your role doesn't involve direct care or support of children or young people, you may encounter them in your work. It is thus crucial to be well versed in their rights. The Code of Conduct explicitly articulates the need to promote and uphold the privacy, dignity, rights, health and well-being of people who use health and social care services and their carers. It's important to remember that children or young people can also be carers. The Human Rights Act of 1998 extends several fundamental rights to every person residing in the UK. These rights include the right to life, freedom from torture or degrading treatment, the right to education, the right to liberty and security, and the protection from discrimination. Globally, the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child, UNCRC, establishes the basic rights that all children under the age of 18 should enjoy. Some key rights in the context of child protection include the right to life, the right to maintain good health, and the right to not be separated from their parents unless there's a risk of harm. Moreover, children are entitled to the protection from drugs, sexual abuse, or any other harm that may hinder their development. Significantly, Article 39 of the UNCRC stipulates that children who have suffered neglect or abuse should receive specialised support, such as counselling, to rehabilitate their self-esteem. With increasing awareness and the advent of digital technology, it's also worth noting the importance of children's digital rights. This includes the right to access information, the right to digital literacy, and the right to digital safety and protection online. These additional aspects underscore the broadened scope of child protection in the modern age. Neglect is defined as the continual failure to meet a child's basic physical or psychological needs, potentially leading to a serious impact on the child's health or development. It can take two forms, active and passive neglect. Active neglect involves deliberate behaviour where the caregiver purposely withholds care or necessary provisions. Passive neglect, on the other hand, involves circumstances where the caregiver is unable to meet their caregiving responsibilities due to factors such as illness, lack of knowledge, stress, or insufficient resources. It can occur even during pregnancy as a result of maternal substance abuse or when the caregiver fails to provide adequate food, shelter, and clothing. Instances of neglect can involve not providing sufficient food, shelter, or clothing, not safeguarding a child from physical harm or danger, not ensuring access to the necessary medical care and treatment, and finally, not responding to a child's fundamental emotional needs. Indicators of neglect in a child might include consistent hunger, poor personal hygiene, tattered clothing, habitual lateness or absence from school, unattended injuries or medical issues, emotional distress such as frequent crying, signs of depression, recurring nightmares or difficulty sleeping, and finally, possible fear towards the caregiver. Omission is the act of knowing about ongoing abuse of any kind but failing to report it. Signs of neglect can also include poor personal hygiene such as soiled clothing, dirty nails and skin, unkempt or lice-infected hair, foul smells, and the presence of feces or urine. In today's context, digital neglect should also be recognised. This involves failing to monitor a child's digital activity, leaving them exposed to potential harm such as cyberbullying, inappropriate contact, and online predators. It is important that caregivers are aware of their responsibilities to provide a safe online environment for children, along with addressing their physical and psychological needs. So, what actually is radicalisation, and why is it a concern that needs to be identified during safeguarding adults, children, and young people? Radicalisation is defined as causing someone to become an advocate of racial, political, or social reform by supporting terrorism and violent extremism. The radicalisation of adults, children, and young people may include encouraging them to undertake violent activities on the ground of religious belief and may include attacks on others, including suicide attacks. Adults, children, and young people may be exposed to messages about terrorism through a family member or friend, a religious school or group, through social media and the internet, and this creates a risk of a child or a young person being drawn into criminal activity and exposes them to significant harm. There is a cross-government strategy to stop people becoming terrorists known as PREVENT. The Counter-Terrorism and Security Act of 2015 contains a duty on specified authorities to have due regard to the need to prevent people from being withdrawn into terrorism. This is also known as the PREVENT duty. PREVENT duty and safeguarding is not about preventing students and individuals from having political and religious views and concerns, but about supporting them to use those concerns or act on them in a non-extremist way. Providers from across the sector can find lots of resources to support them in adopting the PREVENT duty. Under Section 26 of the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act 2015, it places a duty on certain bodies such as schools, colleges, academies and children's services to have due regard to the need to prevent people from being drawn into terrorism. The government has defined extremism in the PREVENT duty as vocal or active opposition to fundamental British values, including democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, and mutual respect and tolerance of different faiths and beliefs. This also includes calls for the death of members of the British Armed Forces. British values are defined as democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty and mutual respect and tolerance for those with different faiths and beliefs. Institutions are expected to encourage students to respect other people with particular regard to the protected characteristics set out in the Equalities Act 2010, which are age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage or civil partnership, pregnancy or maternity, race, religion or belief, sex and sexual orientation. Individuals who may be influenced by extremist views may be having an identity and personal crisis. They may be unsure of their own cultural or religious background. They're not sure about their own place in a multicultural society, have low self-esteem, they may change friends and relationships, start asking questions on background, faith, culture, arguing family, or previous friends. For some, their personal circumstances may have changed and the individual may have experienced racism. They may have been discriminated against, have observed local community tensions, watched and looked up events affecting their country or region of origin, or become disillusioned with systems and local and regional policy. Indicators may start to be noticed, and those who know the person well may be the first to notice changes such as being withdrawn from family and social events, change in mood, changes in language used and appearance. They may become secretive when using the internet, openly expressing extremist views, having literature about violent extremism. They may hang out with, meet, and associate with known extremists and try to recruit others. They may also incite violence. If you believe an individual adult, child, or young person is starting to display some of the indicators identified, then you have a duty under safeguarding to report your concerns. This should be done within your organisation's policies and follow local authority and local government guidance. Holding radical or extremist views is not illegal, but inciting a person to commit an act in the name of any belief is in itself an offence. Victoria Climbier was an 8-year-old girl who lost her life in 2000 due to the severe abuse inflicted by her aunt. Despite being in contact with numerous organisations and agencies, including 3 housing departments, 4 social services departments, 2 general practitioners, 2 hospitals, a National Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children, family centre, and 2 child protection teams, in addition to a childminder and a faith-based organisation, her torment went on unnoticed and unreported. This case underlines the crucial importance of interagency communication and collaboration in every child protection. Effective information sharing can facilitate early intervention, provide coordinated and effective services tailored to an individual or family needs, and safeguard and promote the welfare of individuals. Child support and protection cannot be achieved by a single agency. Every service has a part to play. It must be a clear expectation for all staff that their primary responsibility lies with the children and their family. Key aspects of safeguarding within organisations include robust recruitment and management procedures, clear policies and commitment to prioritising safeguarding, ensuring accountability, training programs to equip staff with necessary skills and knowledge, arrangements to foster effective collaboration with other agencies, a culture that values listening to and engaging children, procedures to address allegations of abuse against staff and volunteers, and finally, encouragement and protection for whistleblowers. Each Safeguarding Children Board has a designated senior officer who ensures that organisations follow proper procedures in handling allegations in accordance with the guidelines. Organisations that offer services or staff, including volunteers, who work with or care for children, are expected to uphold procedures for handling allegations that align with the principles of Working Together to Safeguard Children 2006, Safeguarding Children and Safe Recruitments Chapter 5, and dealing with allegations of abuse against teachers and other staff, particular to schools and educational settings. The Common Assessment Framework, or CAF, is a standardised tool employed by those agencies for joint assessments aiming to eliminate duplicative work and improve access to services for children in need, excluding child protection referrals. Similar to the single assessment process for elderly care, it offers a coherent and consistent approach to evaluating a child's needs. Enhancing practices around information sharing is a fundamental part of the government's approach to improve outcomes for everyone. Various resources supporting this initiative are readily accessible, and you can find links to these on your course dashboard. These resources include the Every Child's Matter Strategy 2003, the HM Government Information Sharing Vision Statement 2006, the Children's Plan 2007, the Think Family Reports 2006 and 2008, the Information Sharing, A Practitioner's Guide 2006, cross-government guidance for practitioners through the entire children's workforce, and finally, updated guidelines to extend the relevance to practitioners working with adults, families, children, and young people. The aim of the information sharing practices is to enhance practice by providing clear advice on when and how to share information and understand the situations where it's inappropriate to share information. It also brings clarity to the legal framework for information sharing and develop comprehension in sharing information professionally and lawfully. An infamous case that underscores the importance of these principles is the heartbreaking case of Baby P in 2007. Peter, also known as Baby P, was a 17-month-old child who was brutally murdered by his mother, her boyfriend, and lodger. Despite enduring over 50 injuries and being visited by authorities 60 times in the 8 months leading to the death, the abuse was never detected or reported. Among those who were in contact with him were social workers, doctors, lawyers, and the police. This case further emphasised the crucial need for effective information sharing and vigilance in safeguarding the welfare of children. When dealing with the child protection matter, it's crucial to remember that children are counting on your help. Here's what they expect. They want you to pay attention to their views and emotions. They expect to be kept informed. They need time to make their own choices. They require you to maintain the confidentiality of their information. They hope for non-stigmatizing services. And finally, they look forward to establishing a positive relationship with you. Should you have concerns about a child's welfare, it's important to report this to your child protection liaison officer or directly to the children's services or the police. You may be asked to provide information, be part of an assessment process, or offer help or particular service to the child or family as per an agreed plan. Furthermore, you might be required to contribute to regular reviews of the child's progress. If a child discloses information to you, it's crucial to pay careful attention, document the conversation in the child's own words, noting the time, sign and date the record you create, take the disclosure seriously, reassure the child they did the right thing by speaking up and it's not their fault, and finally, explain the next steps and the need for you to report while clarifying you can't promise secrecy. Make sure not to ask leading questions, make promises you can't keep, jump to conclusions, speculate or accuse anyone, and finally, decide if the allegations are true or false. That's not your job. Never hold back on reporting a child protection issue due to the public status or the professionalism of the individual involved. For example, consider the unfortunate case of Jimmy Savile, who abused numerous children. When in doubt, always prioritise the child's interest and report your concerns. It's then up to professionals to determine whether it's a child protection issue. Remember, you have a legal obligation to report such issues promptly. Here are some important points to remember. Every child has the right to safety. Adults are tasked with the duty to protect children. Abuse and neglect are harmful. Abuse and neglect continue due to the silence and secrecy that often surround them. Your knowledge might just be one small part of the bigger picture. Children seldom lie about abuse. And finally, an abuser could potentially harm many other children who deserve protection. When working with children and young people, it's paramount that you maintain an understanding of child protection and potential risks that could harm them. Child protection revolves around safeguarding children and preventing harm. Nevertheless, it's also crucial to guard yourself against potential allegation related to child protection. This involves avoiding situations that could leave you vulnerable when interacting with children. In your interactions with children, remember to ensure your behaviour cannot be interpreted or viewed as inappropriate. Never pledge to keep secrets, as by promising secrecy could imply an inappropriate special relationship. Avoid initiating physical contact with a child. There might be instances where a child wants to express affection, typically through a hug. If it happens, make sure it's observed by another adult and keep your hands visible at all times. Avoid intimate contact. There's never a justifiable reason for intimate contact with a child. It should never occur without exception. Refrain from sharing personal information. A child should not have access to your personal data, such as your mobile number or home address. Sharing such information could be interpreted as forming a special relationship. And finally, be mindful of social media. Don't accept friend requests or personal messages from children on social media platforms. Keep your profile private. These guidelines help ensure a safe environment for both you and the children you interact with, preventing misunderstandings and reducing the risk of inappropriate conduct. Where issues of child abuse are suspected, these must be immediately reported, and this can be done through a number of channels. It may be that if you're working with children, there will be a designated safeguarding lead whose responsibility is to deal with any issues relating to child protection. If it becomes apparent that there may be a case, whether this is through observation or where a child has spoken to you directly, you are legally obliged to report this. There are a number of large support mechanisms in place. Calling the police to report a potential child protection issue is probably the most common procedure followed. Social services deal with child protection issues on a daily basis and have the processes in place to ensure that children are protected. Social services will also become involved in these cases at some point, even if you decide to highlight the potential issue through another source. All schools, hospitals, and venues that see a large number of children will have a designated safeguarding lead. This person or persons will have a number of contacts and are required to investigate any potential child protection case. The National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, or NSPCC, has a number of support helplines which children or adults can report potential abuse. They have years of experience in protecting children. Whichever route you decide to use, make sure that you have taken the matter seriously, listened carefully, and recorded notes on what you have observed. If a child has spoken to you, try to record the conversation in the child's words and note the time. Sign and date the records you make and reassure the child that they are right to tell you and that they are not to blame. Finally, explain what will happen next, that you have to report this and you cannot promise not to tell. We all hope that you'll never need to report a potential case of child abuse, but we have to accept that in life, unfortunately, this does happen. Make sure that if it does, you're ready, willing, and informed to help protect the child and put a stop to the situation continuing. In some circumstances, Scottish legislation is different from other parts of the UK. In this video, we're going to look at the legislation in Scotland that covers the health and social care sectors. The following acts that we're going to talk about apply only to people living in Scotland. The National Assistance Act 1948. This act, which founded the National Assistance Board, provides public assistance by allowing for means-tested payments which were taken from national insurance contributions. This establishment of welfare benefits helped to move from institutional to community-based care. The Social Work Scotland Act 1968. Local councils have a duty under this act to assess a person's community care needs and decide whether to arrange any special services. Any assistance should be based on an assessment of the person's care needs and should take into account their preferences. The National Assistance Assessment of Resources Regulations 1992. This and the associated charging for residential accommodation guidance, also known as CRAG, was published by the Scottish Government to allow local councils to charge for the residential care they provide or arrange. Adults with Incapacity Scotland Act 2000. This act creates provisions for protecting the welfare of adults who are unable to make decisions for themselves because of a mental disorder or an inability to communicate. It allows other people to make decisions on behalf of these adults about things such as arranging services, managing finances, property, and medical treatment. People who are most likely to use this provision of the Act include those with a learning disability, dementia, mental ill health, head injury, or physical disability that prevents them from communicating. The Regulation of Care Scotland Act 2001. The main aim of this Act was to improve the standards of social care services. The Act meant that far more care services and staff came under scrutiny and had to conform to established standards. If a care service or an individual fails to comply with the Act and associated regulations, they can be deregistered and will no longer be able to provide services. The Community Care and Health Scotland Act 2002. This Act introduced two new changes. The first change was the introduction of free personal care for older people, regardless of their income or whether they live at home or in a residential care home. The second change was the creation of rights for informal or unpaid carers, with the intention of providing adequate support services to ensure the continuation of caregiving in the community. The Act was then amended in June 2018 as Parliament agreed to extend free personal care to people under the age of 65, regardless of their condition. This Act came into force on the 1st of April 2019. The Mental Health Care and Treatment Scotland Act 2003. This Act, which came into force in 2005, increases the rights and protection of people with mental disorders. A mental disorder includes a mental illness, a learning disability, or a personality disorder. The requirements of this Act are intended to ensure that care and compulsory measures of detention can be used only when there is a significant risk to the safety or welfare of the patient or other people. The Adult Support Protection Scotland Act 2007. This Act gives greater protection to adults at risk of harm or neglect. The Act defines adults at risk as those aged 16 years and over who are unable to safeguard their own well-being, property, rights, or other interests, are at risk of harm, and finally, because they are affected by disability, mental disorder, illness, or physical and mental infirmity, and are more vulnerable to being harmed than adults who are not so affected. The Act places a duty on local councils to inquire and investigate cases where harm is known or suspected. They have powers to visit and interview people, arrange medical examinations, examine records, and issue protection orders. There are lots of places to access advice and help, including the local council's social care department. You should also make sure that if the person is involved in caring and has been paid for this, that the abuse is reported to the police and Disclosure Scotland. The Equality Act 2010. Under this Act, described by NHS Health Scotland, it is unlawful to discriminate against someone because of their protected characteristics. If you receive care services and feel that you have been treated unfairly because of a relevant protected characteristic, you may be able to challenge this. The Patient Rights Scotland Act 2011. This Act supports the Scottish Government's plans for high-quality NHS that respects the rights of patients, as well as their carers and those who deliver NHS services. Included in the Act was the establishment of Patient Advice and Support Service, also known as PASS, which provides free confidential information, advice and support to patients, their carers and families about NHS healthcare. Social Care Self-Directed Support Scotland Act 2013. This Act makes legal provisions relating to the arranging of care and support, community care services and children's services to provide a range of choices for people on how they are provided with support. Public Bodies Joint Work in Scotland Act 2014. This Act sets out the framework for integrating adult health and social care to ensure a consistent provision of sustainable care services for the increasing numbers of people in Scotland who need joined-up support and care. This is particularly for people with multiple, complex or long-term conditions. The final Act we're going to look at is the Carers Scotland Act 2016. This Act was passed by the Scottish Parliament on the 4th of February 2016 and came into effect on the 1st of April 2018. The Act will ensure better and more consistent support for carers and young carers so that they continue to care in better health and be able to have a life alongside caring. It is designed to support carers' health and well-being and make sure that caring is more sustainable. Keeping children safe in education, which is abbreviated to KCSIE, is a central component of child protection within the educational sector in the United Kingdom. As a statutory guidance, it provides schools and colleges with a comprehensive framework to help safeguard and promote the welfare of children and young people in education. KCSIE was first introduced in 2014 by the UK Department of Education and has since been updated several times to reflect the evolving nature of child protection risks and issues. The guidance is legally binding and applies to all schools, colleges and educational institutions, whether state-funded or independent across England. The main aims of KCSIE is to ensure the safety and well-being of children and young people while they're within educational environments. The guidance sets out the legal duties and responsibilities that educational institutions and their staff must fulfil and provides clear instructions on the procedures that must be followed when child protection concerns arise. In the context of UK child protection, KCSIE serves several crucial functions. KCSIE provides a robust framework for safeguarding children within educational institutions. It details how schools and colleges should approach child protection and safeguarding, such as developing and implementing effective safeguarding policies and training of staff on safeguarding issues and reporting any concerns promptly and accurately. KCSIE sets out the legal obligations for educational institutions under UK law, such as the Children's Act of 1989 and 2004 and the Education Act of 2002. It outlines the legal duties that all school and college staff have to protect children from harm and abuse and to report any concerns they have about the child's welfare. KCSIE underlines the importance of regular and appropriate staff training. It mandates that all staff members in educational institutions must undergo safeguarding and child protection training at regular intervals to keep their knowledge and skills up to date. KCSIE stresses the importance of interagency working with safeguarding children. It highlights the role of local authorities, healthcare professionals, police and social workers in responding to safeguarding concerns and how schools and colleges should cooperate with these agencies. In an increasingly digital age, KCSIE recognises the significance of online safety. It provides guidance on teaching children about the online dangers, the need of staff to be aware of potential online risks, and the importance of effective filtering and monitoring systems. KCSIE plays an integral role in child protection, providing a comprehensive and detailed set of guidelines for safeguarding children in educational institutions. As society and technology evolve, so do the threats and challenges for child protection. The consistent updating KCSIE ensures that educational institutions in the UK are equipped with the knowledge and tools they need to navigate these evolving challenges and maintain a safe and supportive environment for all children and young people. In this section, we'll look at basic first aid advice for life-threatening conditions, ensuring that you know the dangers, how to keep safe, and give the correct care while waiting for the emergency services to arrive. This section is not designed to prepare you for all first aid emergencies, but it will help you deal with some life-threatening situations. This is a section that will need a practical module where you practice the skills. If you need help in arranging this, please contact us at Pro Trainings, as we have a national network of instructors that can come and deliver a short, practical, basic life support session. Before we start, it's important to ensure that when dealing with adults, children, or infants, that all information about them is kept confidential and only available to those who have the rights to access that information. Anyone who is responsible for the storage of records and information must be aware of their responsibilities under the Data Protection Act 1988 and, if relevant, the Freedom of Information Act 2000. Depending on your particular job role, there will be information and records that will be required to be completed should an infant, child, or adult be involved in an accident or become ill whilst in the health and social care setting. Your employer will be able to tell you what records need to be completed and what the workplace policies and procedures are for dealing with an accident or illness. The reason we record information in the accident book is to meet the requirements of acts and regulations, and the data can also help identify trends in accidents or illness and can be used for investigations, to control health and safety risks in the workplace, and be used for reference in future first aid needs assessments. Finally, training in basic life support and first aid needs to be refreshed regularly to ensure that your skills are fresh and to ensure competency of your skills. A practical session needs to be arranged to meet the competency part of this care certificate standard. If you need help with this locally, please contact us at Pro Trainings. Fears of first aid are things that could actually stop you from helping somebody or delaying the care you give because you're scared or concerned for your safety. The first one of these fears is the fear of infection. The patient you're dealing with could have a bloodborne pathogen or other problems that could infect you, but this is quite a serious fear. We can address these fears very easily by using face shields, gloves, masks, and also taking some other basic precautions. We need to make sure that you do not come into contact with the body fluid of the patient, and a PPE barrier will prevent this. We'll look at this in more detail about barriers in other videos. Another fear is the fear of harming the patient. If you have a patient who is not breathing, you cannot hurt them as they're basically dead. If you do nothing, they will not die, they will stay dead. Anything you do will increase the chance of their survival. With less serious conditions like a serious bleed or a fracture, trust your training, keep calm, talk to the patient, and treat what you see. One instance where you could do harm to a patient is someone with a possible spinal injury. If you think they could have a possible spinal injury, then you treat it as if they have got one and don't move them. Another fear can be the fear of litigation. If you help this person and something goes wrong, are you going to get sued? Now with this, we address in other videos because we are asking permission for help by the patient by saying things like, can I help you? So they are giving you their consent, and in most circumstances, this is not a problem. It's not to say that someone won't be sued, but it may well be that the company is sued rather than the first aider. All you can do is your best as a first aider. Follow all the rules, follow your workplace policies and procedures, and you'll find the treatment is quite straightforward. There should be no situations where you would actually get sued yourself. One big concern you may have when you're dealing with a first aid emergency is getting hurt yourself. What you don't want to do is start off being the first aider and then getting hurt and becoming a patient yourself. So it's vital that you ensure that every time you approach an emergency, you stop, think, and act, and make sure you're not going to put yourself in any danger. Always be aware the whole time that you are dealing with any emergency scene to ensure that there are no new dangers, but also think about the patient themselves. Maybe they could be a danger to you or themselves. And with all these fears of first aid, they're all quite straightforward to address, but they are real fears. But as you go through this course, you'll find that these fears can be addressed. With first aid, if your intentions are good and you help somebody, then you have nothing to worry about. It's far better to actually do something to help a person than leave them and do nothing. When you approach somebody for the first time, you need to gain the person's permission or consent before you help them. If you're in a workplace, you may well be working with the person. They may know you, but you still need to ask for their permission. Imagine yourself, you had an accident or you're feeling unwell, and suddenly someone came up to you and started telling you what to do, bossing you about, and trying to treat you. You may well just want to be given a little bit of time and a little bit of space, but you also want to be treated with respect. If someone introduces themselves and asks permission, then you'll feel at ease. What you need to do when you approach a patient is introduce yourself and ask their permission. Say something like, "Hello, my name's Keith. I'm a first aider. May I help you?" As soon as the person agrees or consents, then you would have, in the eyes of the law, permission to actually help them. They do not actually have to speak. They could nod or give other signs that they want your help, as long as it's a positive reaction from them. An example of when they couldn't talk would be if they were choking, when they would nod or show other signs of consent. If you ask permission and the person says no, then you can't directly help them, but you can still call the EMS or others to help deal with the incident. It may well be the person doesn't want any fuss made about them, or they may be embarrassed, worried, or it might be they have other problems that they do not want to discuss. It may even be that you caused the accident and they may well blame you for the condition they're in. If someone does deny help, then you need to try and gain their trust. So you can still talk to them, you can still call the emergency services, and you can still report the incident if it's in a workplace setting. Do what you can to try and get that person's trust and then help them, but do not push yourself in any danger or enter into any arguments. If you're dealing with a child, it may well be you need to ask the permission of the parent or guardian. So you may say something like, "May I help your child?" Obviously, if you're dealing with an infant, then this baby is not going to be able to talk back to you. So you have to talk to the parent or the guardian, but if alone, you would still help the infant or the child as you would have their implied consent. The other problem could be if someone is unconscious and therefore they cannot answer you. If someone is unconscious, you still ask them permission for something like, "Hello, my name's Keith, I'm a first aider. May I help you?" Then even though they're not going to answer you, in the eyes of the law, you would have what's called assumed consent. How assumed consent or implied consent works is, if you picture yourself now, if you're out on the street somewhere and you collapsed, would you want somebody to give you first aid? If your heart stopped, would you want someone to give you CPR? The answer is probably yes, So in the eyes of the law, if you ask somebody and they don't answer, then you would have their consent to actually help them. The whole time you're dealing with the incident, always talk to the person, even if they're unconscious. Just keep talking the whole time, because hearing is often the last thing to go. So it may well be that they're not actually showing signs of movement or being obviously conscious, but they can still hear you. Talking to them can be quite comforting. For example, if you're putting someone in a recovery position, talk to them the whole time. Tell them exactly what you're doing, and at every stage, keep talking to them, reassuring them until the EMS arrive. First aid is the initial help you provide, but you would need to activate the Emergency Medical Services, or the EMS, to help you and take over the treatment of the patient. It does not matter which emergency service you require, the phone number is the same. Delaying in activating the EMS will affect the patient's chance of recovery, increases pain, and can lead to further complications. The number you need to call is 999, or you can call the European-wide emergency number of 112. They both work the same. You can dial from a mobile or a landline phone. If you're in Europe, you need to call 112 to activate the emergency medical service. When you're making the call, think about putting your phone on hands-free or speakerphone so you can still deal with the patient while speaking to the emergency services. By doing this, they can guide you through what you need to do. Depending on what's happened, they'll rate the call in terms of priority. For example, if you have a patient who is not breathing, it'll be a category A call, and help will be set as a priority. If it's someone with an injury that's not life-threatening, like a fractured arm, an ambulance will be sent, but would not be a high category as a cardiac arrest. First, you'll be asked which service you require. This could be ambulance, fire, police, coast guard, mountain rescue, or any other service. The EMS may send out other services as well as the one you think you want, as they may be able to help you. You need to say briefly what's happened so that the operator can help you better. If they need to know more, they'll ask you. The EMS can decide exactly what services to send and how many of each unit. You'll need to give them exact instructions on your location. Tell them exactly where you are and any other information that they're likely to need. If you do not know your exact location, consider using What3 Words or location apps on your phone that can give you your exact location down to a 3-meter square. The EMS may be able to track your location using a landline number or track your mobile location from cell towers. The operator can stay on the line and give you help and guidance and also reassure you. They can help you the best they can to give you confidence to deal with the situation that you're faced with. Other things you can do is to make sure that the scene is safe and easy for the emergency services when they arrive. If you're at home, unlock all the doors, turn the lights on, and open up the front door so they know they can come straight in, so you can continue caring for the patient until they take over. Another thing that will help you is lock away your pets so it's safe when the emergency services do arrive. In a workplace setting, tell other people and the reception that you're expecting the EMS so they know where to send them to. The EMS may go to reception, and if they don't know what's happened, they're not sure exactly where you are, and this can delay time. Ideally, if there are others, send someone to meet the EMS and guide them to your exact location. If you're getting someone else to call the emergency services, give them clear instructions like, can you go and dial 999 and ask for an ambulance? Tell them we have a non-breathing adult and we're delivering CPR. We're at 22 Westside Centre, London Road, Colchester, and come back and tell me what they say. A sentence like this is clear, and you're asking them to come back and tell you what's said, so you know the EMS are coming and when. There are other ways to call emergency services. It may be you're working offshore in a boat or in a remote area, or an area where mobile phones do not work. In these cases, you may be using two-way radios or satellite phones to activate emergency medical services. Make sure you know how to use these and where they're kept, avoiding delays in an emergency. If you're hard of hearing, you can also notify the emergency services by text messages. On the download area of this course, we've put a leaflet on how to set this up. Finally, if you've called the EMS and they're on their way and anything changes or you need an update, you can call them back again and they'll stay on the line if needed to help you. The chain of survival is a simple concept to show your role as a first aider in basic life support and what the key stages of care are for that patient in a cardiac arrest. The chain of survival has 4 stages. The first one is early access to emergency services. The second is early CPR. The third is early AED. And the fourth is early advanced life support. We'll now look at the first one to start with. Early access to emergency services. What this means is you'll need to be calling the emergency services as soon as possible. As soon as you find out this person is not breathing, either you need to call or get somebody else to make the call before you start CPR. There's no point in carrying on CPR if the emergency services are not on their way. You can put your phone into speakerphone mode. That way you can speak and deliver CPR at the same time. Ask bystanders to get an AED if there's one available. The second part of the chain of survival is CPR. It's vital that the first aider delivers effective CPR so that when the emergency services do arrive, they actually have a patient which they can do something with. If CPR is not being carried out, it's highly probable that further links to the chains are not going to work. Often in first aid, this is where you stop, unless there is an AED available. An AED is an automatic external defibrillator, and it may be that there's one in the workplace or a community AED may be available. If not, the EMS or community first responder will bring one. If you have one, they're very easy to use and they talk you through exactly what you need to do. Ideally, you need training to practice AED use, but the EMS can guide you through what to do if you don't have training. The AED delivers an electric shock across the heart to interrupt the abnormal twitching of the heart and hopefully resets the heart to beating normally again. The final link of the chain of survival is advanced care. This will be given by the emergency services themselves. This could be, in addition to using the AED, they may well be using drugs, oxygen, or other treatments that they can give. This is far beyond first aid. As first aiders, we're dealing with the first 2 or 3 links of the chain of survival. If any one of the links of the chain are broken, then the chance of survival of the person massively reduced. So if you call the emergency services and don't deliver CPR, then the effectiveness of the AED unit and advanced care is going to be reduced. Or if you just deliver care but don't call your EMS, then the ambulance service is not going to arrive. For every minute's delay between when the person goes into cardiac arrest to the time when the AED arrives, the chance of survival is dropped by 10%. This means if the ambulance gets there within the target time of 8 minutes, the person's chance of survival is only around about 20%. So what we need to do is make sure that the links of the chain are followed. We call the emergency services straight away. We give effective CPR until the AED arrives. Then the person's chance of survival is improved. There are lots of mnemonics that can help you with first aid, and there are 2 main mnemonics with initial assessment and care. These are the Dr. ABC and also the ABCDs. What we're going to do now is describe both of these. They're designed as a reminder for what to do when you first approach somebody. We'll first look at the Dr. ABCs, and then we'll briefly go over the ABCDs because they're very similar. Dr. ABCs start off with D for danger. When you're first approaching an emergency scene, you need to look out for any possible dangers that are going to cause you harm. These could be things like chemicals, glass, slippery floors, or even the person themselves. Anything that's a possible danger. The next thing you need to do is the R, which stands for response. This is where you're going to introduce yourself by saying, "Hello, my name is Keith, I'm a first aider." Or maybe just give them a tap on the collarbone and saying, "Are you okay?" You're trying to get some kind of response out of them through touch and also sound. Hopefully you'll get a response in this way. If not, the next thing you're going to do, if they're unconscious, is you're going to do the A, and you're going to open the airway, and then B to check to see if they're breathing. To do this, we use the head tilt chin lift. So you put one hand on their forehead and the other under their chin, tilt the head back to open the airway. What we're doing is drawing the tongue away from the back of their throat to clear their airway. Then we do the B, which is breathing. Place your ear right down over their mouth, and you're looking towards the chest, and you're able to do a breathing check for 10 seconds. So while you're doing this, you're looking, listening, and feeling for signs of breathing. If the person is breathing, then you can stop there and treat accordingly. If they're not breathing, this is where you would do the C, which is CPR, or compressions. We'll cover CPR and chest compressions in later videos. The final D is defibrillation. This is where you use an AED, if one's available, to deliver a shock across the chest to hopefully start their heart beating again. The ABCDs work in a similar way. A stands for assess the scene. You're looking for any possible dangers. Also, it means apply your barriers to make sure that you've got your gloves on. And A also means airway. Again, head tilt chin lift. The B part is the breathing check. C will be CPR or chest compressions. Finally, D is defibrillations if you have a defibrillator available. The S's stand for serious bleeding, shock, and spinal injury. These are all the life-threatening conditions, and again, we'll cover all of these on separate videos. The use of mnemonics can be a useful tool, and it doesn't matter which one you use, or you can use them both. But they're good tools to help you remember what to do in an emergency situation when you're dealing with any patient, whether they're conscious or unconscious. When you come across a situation, or in your role as a first aider, you're called to deal with someone who is unconscious, you need to call for help and try and find out if someone has witnessed what's happened. First, you will need to stop, think, and then act. Look for hazards and make sure any are removed. Look for other potential dangers and things that may harm you in any way. Make sure there's someone with you if possible, so you can send them to call the emergency services if needed. Introduce yourself to the patient, give them a little tap on the collarbone and see if there's any response and ask them permission to help. If they're conscious, you can talk to them and find out what's happened and stop them from moving while you assess them and decide what action to take. If they're unconscious, make sure that they're breathing. If they're not, you will need to commence CPR. To check for breathing, you'll need to open the airway by lifting the head back. This draws the tongue away from the back of the throat and allows air to pass. Place one hand on the patient's forehead and the other under their chin. Have a quick look in their mouth to see if there are any obstructions. Gently lift the chin and push the forehead back in a smooth, gentle action. Look, listen and feel for breathing for up to 10 seconds by placing your ear close to their mouth and listen and feel for breathing and look down their body for the chest rise and fall. If they're breathing normally, CPR is not required, but still send someone to call for an ambulance, making sure you tell them to come back and tell you when the ambulance will arrive. To make sure that the patient's airway remains open and to ensure that they cannot choke on their own vomit, you will need to place them into the recovery position. If available, put a pair of gloves on and do a quick head-to-toe survey to check for any injuries. Gently feel their shoulders, arms and chest for any deformity, blood or fluid. Check that their legs are in a normal position and there are no real damage to the hips or legs. When your check is complete and you found no evidence of injury, the patient should be placed in a recovery position as follows. Kneel next to the patient. Ensure the legs are straight and the feet together. Take the hand nearest to you and place it on the floor at 90 degrees to the body. They'll end up resting their head on this arm. Take the hand furthest away and hold it in your hand that's nearest to their head and bring across their body and hold against their cheek, which is nearest to you. Do not let go. With your other hand, grab their knee furthest away from you. Lift it to bring their foot flat on the floor, and then using their leg as a lever, pull them towards you so that they're on their side. Check the airways open, and if not, tilt the head back further to make sure that they can breathe correctly. Tidy their legs so that it supports them and it makes them stay on their side. From this point, your role as a first aider is to keep the patient comfortable and warm. Remember to speak to the patient and monitor them at all times to make sure they're still breathing. If you're completely alone with the patient and don't have a phone, this is when you would need to leave the patient and go and call the emergency services, but make sure you check that they're breathing when you leave them and when you return. One of the fears of first aid is the fear of infection. What you don't want to do is get someone else's blood or body fluids on your hands. If you're dealing with any body fluids and you've got gloves on, it'll be much easier to deal with the situation and you can keep yourself safe. There are lots of different types of gloves and colours, but they're all used in the same way and they're very straightforward to use. The key types you'll see are nitrile gloves and vinyl gloves, but most gloves now are the nitrile type. These are available as powdered and the more common unpowdered. There are also latex gloves, but the problem with latex is it can be an allergy to some people. It can cause minor allergies like rashes through to severe allergies, even anaphylactic shock. With the gloves themselves, the first thing to do is make sure that there's no faults in them. So you can just trap a piece of air into the glove, squeeze it just to see whether there's any faults within the fingers. Once you've done that, you need to pull them onto your hands. If you've got any rings, then take them off. If you're just wearing something like a wedding band, that'll be okay. If you don't want to put the ring on, have the ring cause the glove to break. Pull the gloves on carefully so you've got all the fingers and thumbs in. And then just check that they are fully round your wrist, so it's fully up to your wrist. Once you've done the first hand, go on to the second hand. Once you've got the second glove on, just check that the fingers are all lined up, and you can just push your fingers together to keep them nice and tidy. That's now with your gloves on, and you can carry on and treat the patient. If you're needing to move between patient A and patient B, then you need to take these gloves off and put a fresh set on, or if they get damaged, then you need to remove them and put a fresh set on. To remove the gloves, just pinch the glove on its outside and turn the first glove so it's fully inside out. Then scrunch it up into the gloved hand, and then put your fingers underneath the second glove and pull it so that all of the infectious material and the original first glove are inside, since it's then safe to dispose of correctly. Finally, one thing you can do if you've got used gloves, dressings, blood-soaked tissues, or anything else you want to pick up and keep safe, is to pick them up with the gloved hand before you take the first glove off. Now, all of those infectious material is now in the first glove, which you can put into the infectious waste bag. CPR is a technique we'd employ if somebody is not breathing. CPR stands for cardiopulmonary resuscitation. The act of CPR is the twist which squeezes the heart, which forces blood out of the heart, circulating around the body. The heart can be divided into two sides. The right-hand side of your heart will pump blood to the lungs where it's oxygenated. Once it's been oxygenated, it comes back to the left-hand side of the heart, where it's pumped throughout the body's arteries, through the body's organs and capillaries, and then it comes back to the heart through the veins into the right-hand side again. This continues throughout your life. The heart will beat faster if you exercise and slower as you rest. The heart is an amazing organ and functions no matter what you do, but things can go wrong with it. Your heart beats by firing small electric shocks across it to make it contract from the pacemakers within the heart. This makes the muscles contract, causing the beating action of your heart. If there is a problem with your heart, like a blockage, then this can cause a disruption in the supply of oxygen-rich blood, or the heart can go into cardiac arrest when it actually stops beating normally. In around 85 to 90% of the time, the heart will go into what's called VF, ventricular fibrillation. This is described as an abnormal twitching of the heart. When the heart is in VF, it's quivering, it's not actually pumping any blood. When we deliver CPR, what we want to do is be able to push down to the breastbone, which in turn pushes on the heart to force the blood out of the heart and around the body. By delivering CPR, we're not going to start the heart again, we're just going to keep the body supplied with oxygen-rich blood. The only way we're going to start the heart is when a defibrillator is used, and we try and interrupt this abnormal twitching of the heart, allowing it to start beating again. The paramedics may deliver drugs to try and help the situation. CPR may sound technical, but the technique is very easy. You don't need to know if the heart is beating or what's happening in the heart. We just need to check if they're breathing. If they're not breathing, we commence CPR. What we're going to look at now is CPR. So what we're going to do is look at what CPR is and how to actually do it. Now, the first thing is look at what is CPR. CPR stands for cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So what this is we're going to run through a process of giving chest compressions and breaths to keep this person with oxygen-rich blood going around the system. So the idea is by pushing down on the chest, we're going to squeeze the heart. When you squeeze the heart, there's blood in the heart, so it's going to force any of that blood out because there's only one-way valves going in and out the heart. So when you squeeze it, it has to be going out through the arteries. So by pushing down, we force the blood out, and by letting go, we suck more blood back in. So it's crude, but it does perform an element of circulation. So although the heart is not beating on its own, it is still pumping blood out as we push down on the chest. The idea of breaths is we're going to apply breaths into the lungs to flush out the air so we can put oxygen into the lungs more than that's in there now. So there are other types of CPR we're covering different videos, and that is chest compression only. This is where we just give compressions. So the first thing we need to do is to approach the scene safely, as we've covered this in other films already. So we're making sure there's no dangers. We're going to introduce ourselves, and we're going to give them a tap on the collarbone to make sure that they're actually, whether they're okay, to try and get an answer back from them. Because at this stage, we don't actually know this person requires CPR. Now, the requirement for when do we start CPR is, are they breathing? Yes or no? Now, with breaths, we are looking for normal breathing. Now, it could be that they have agonal breathing. This is a gaspy, raspy type noise. Now, it does happen, anything up to 40% of chances. So this is not normal breathing. It's just a gaspy type noise. So we mustn't mistake that for normal breathing. But by doing the breathing check, we're checking the breathing, but we're also looking down the chest to see the chest rise and fall. As far as starting CPR, what we're trying to do with this is the second link in the chain of survival. So the first link will be activate emergency services once we found out they're not breathing. And the second link is early CPR. Now, the sooner we get started on this, the better. Now, watching this film, you might think, I'm not going to remember all this. It's very difficult. It's not difficult. It is very straightforward. And what you'll be doing is you're learning this information now, and you'll be able to recall this in an emergency. It's going to be stressful. It's going to be tough, but you will make a difference because with the person who's not breathing, their chance of survival is dropping and dropping and dropping. And what we need to do is make sure the defibrillator and AED arrives as soon as possible. Then the defibrillator is there to shock the heart, and hopefully it will restart beating in a normal fashion. Now, the chance of survival drops by around about 10% every single minute that you have to delay the AED arriving. So the point of CPR is trying to extend this period, keeping the body oxygenated blood flowing through it, keeping the brain and the vital organs alive, so that hopefully when the shock is delivered, then we can bring this person round. Now, we're going to carry this on until the defibrillator arrives, but also when the paramedics arrive, they will come in and they will take over. But don't just stop just because they walk in the room. They will probably need you to carry on doing chest compressions until they get all their equipment ready. So ask them. They will talk to you anyway, but find out what they need to do. So you carry on doing a CPR, gives them a chance to get the defibrillator ready, because the key thing here is shocking them as quickly as possible. So anything you can do to make that shock come on quicker, then that's ideal. So now what we're going to do is look at the process for CPR. So the first thing we did is to assess the scene, stop, think, act, approach the patient, just introduce yourself. Hello, my name's Keith, I'm a first aider, may I help you? And we're trying to get a response, and then give them a tap on the collarbone. Are you okay? Are you okay? Asking a direct question to, again, hopefully get a response. Next thing we need to do is open the airway, because with the head in a rested position, it's likely that the tongue has fallen to the back of the throat, and this can stop them breathing. So by opening the airway, it pulls the tongue away from the back of the throat, and then hopefully they'll start breathing again. To do this, we use the head tilt chin lift method. Hand on the forehead, the other hand underneath the chin. We tilt the head right the way back. That way is open the airway to pull the tongue away from the back of the throat. And then we need to pop our ear down and have a listen. So we just have a quick look, see if there's anything in the airway, just in case there was something obviously obstructing the airway. And we need to put ear right down close. And we're keeping our ear very close, keeping the airway open the whole time. We're looking down the body, and we're trying to assess whether they're breathing. So you do this breathing check for 10 seconds. So while you're doing that, count out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. After the 10 seconds, the next thing we need to do is activate emergency services. So for this, we would take our mobile phone out, or we have a phone nearby. If you're on your own, we must call the EMS, because if we don't, then we're going to carry on doing CPR and there's no one going to be here to come and help you. So when you make that call, tell them the nice, clear information. Now, the ideal will be if you've got a mobile phone, put it onto speakerphone, you can leave the phone by the head, and then you can start CPR even while you're calling emergency services. That can save a valuable time, maybe a minute in the time you would be talking on the phone. You can be doing continual chest compressions, and also the operator on the other end will be able to help you and guide you through the process right until when the emergency services arrive. If you're sending someone for getting the EMS, then give them good, clear instructions and keep it short and easy. To say something like, can you go and dial 999, ask for an ambulance, tell them we've got a non-breathing adult and we are doing CPR, tell them the address where you're at, and then, most importantly, and come back and tell me what they say. Because we need to know that emergency service has been called, that they haven't got distracted and not actually made that call. Because you might need to leave and make the call yourself or send somebody else. The other thing you can do is ask if there's an AED available. Where we are right now, there is an AED at the workplace, so we can send someone to get that AED unit, and then that will speed things up before the EMS even arrive. Once you've activated emergency services, the next thing we need to do is do the compressions. So what we're going to do is we're going to place our hands, interlock them. We're going to push down on the center of the breastbone with the heel of the hand. So interlock your fingers, push right way down on the center. We also need to put our shoulders above, so we're pushing down straight onto the breastbone rather than pushing down at an angle. This is the most effective way of pushing down on the breastbone and hopefully pushing down on the heart to expel any blood out of the heart. We're going to do a depth of 5 to 6 centimeters, and we're going to do that at a rate of between 100 and 120 compressions per minute. And that's roughly 2 compressions per second. The other really important thing to do is we push down, but we must also fully release. So don't push down and then leave any pressure on. We must make sure that the heart fills back up with blood when we release. If not, this process will be less effective. So we arms right above, arms straight, shoulders above, and we're pushing down 30 times. And again, you can count out loud so that everyone around you knows what you're doing, and hopefully there'll be less chance of distracting you. And if you do get distracted and you lose count, yes, we're saying 30 compressions, but if you do 28 or 32, it's not a problem. So if you're not sure, then just get the other compressions done. But try and count out loud. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. The next thing we need to do is open the airway, the same as we did before. So we're tilting the head right the way back. If you've got a barrier, put the barrier on, whether it be a pocket mask or a sheet barrier, whichever. You need to squeeze the nose, otherwise when you blow into the mouth, what can happen is the air can come straight out the nose. We need to squeeze the nose. We're then sealing our mouth around the mouth of the mannequin, and we're blowing in 2 breaths. And we're blowing those breaths for about a second until we see the chest rise. We don't want to be putting loads and loads of air in, because eventually that air will just go expand the lungs, and then it can just pass down to the stomach, and it'll be less effective breaths. So we literally squeeze on, open the airway. Once we've done the 2 breaths, we want to try and do this quickly. So from compression 30 breaths back to compression 1, ideally you want to try and keep that at less than 5 seconds. So it keeps it nice and steady. So breath in, out, in, straight back onto the compressions. And then we go straight up to the top, and then we carry on with the compressions. And we do 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 32, 32. And we continue that as long as we can until the emergency services arrive. And if you get tired, you can hand over to a second rescuer. We'll cover how to do that in a separate video. And also, if you get tired, you might find it easier just to do chest compressions rather than doing the breaths. But ideally, you want to be doing 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 32, 32, until the AED arrives. And we say with CPR that you continue until the AED arrives, until a second rescue arrives, or the EMS arrive. Now, what we're going to do now is have a quick look at how we do this handover. And this handover is literally handing over to a second rescuer. So this person could be CPR qualified or not. They could do continual chest compressions or they could do full CPR. That's optional. It doesn't matter which way around. The most important thing is if we keep these chest compressions going. So whatever happens, we want to keep them going. So the cycle will be that you've called over someone, the emergency service has already been activated, someone's going to come back, and then you're getting tired. And typically this will be around about the 2-minute mark. Keeping CPR going over 2 minutes is hard. I'm not saying you couldn't do it. You could do it for a lot longer than that. But we need to make sure the CPR is as effective as possible the whole time. So what we need to do is call that person over. If they haven't got any training at all, you need to teach them what to do. So we're going to bring them over. We're going to talk to them. We're going to get them to watch where our hand positions are. Now, hopefully they can put the hands in the same way, but it may be they have trouble with this. So you could just cross the hands over. It's not textbook perfect according to what you're supposed to do. If you can't link the hands, you're better off doing something. Find out if they're happy just doing compressions. If they are, or if they want to do full CPR, they can do that as well. So then count them in. So get them ready, posed, and then count them down, say 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then they take over. It gives you a chance to rest. You can keep going to talking to them. You can give them a count, so you can literally keep counting them into each one of the compressions. Make sure you say well done, encourage them as much as you can. And then when you want to then take back over, you can tell them, right, count down, and then I'm going to take over. So if they're not doing breaths and you're happy doing breaths, then once they've done those compressions and then they count down to 0, you could then put your face shield on, open the airway, hold the nose, give your breaths, and then get straight back into compressions, 32, 32, 32. Or if for any reason you want to carry on chest compression, you can do that as well. It may be that you have to do CPR, but you're not able or not willing to do the breaths. Now, this is one of the fears of first aid we've discussed earlier. It may well be that their face is covered in vomit or blood, or maybe they've got an injury to the face and you can't physically put your face down there, or you just don't want to, you don't feel comfortable doing the rescue breath part of the CPR cycle. This is not a problem, because we can do continual chest compressions. It's exactly the same as we've already learned, but this time we are just doing compressions, we're not doing any breaths. So the other advantage of this is that it's simpler and it's easier to do. So you can also do this if someone you handed over to a second rescuer and that person was not comfortable doing CPR, full CPR, but you are. So then we can mix and match that way as well. As far as doing continual chest compressions, there is already oxygen-rich blood in the body when you arrive, so there's a starting point. And also, as you push down on the chest, you will force air out of the lungs, and when you let go, air will come back into the lungs. It's very crude, but there is an element of air flushing in and out of the lungs. The other advantage of that air is it's 21% oxygen instead of the exhaled air that you would blow out, which is only 16%, because your body uses about 5%. So the process is exactly the same as normal CPR. We're stopping, thinking, and acting. We're doing a little risk assessment, make sure there's no dangers that we're going to come across. We're approaching. We're going to still introduce ourselves. Hello, my name's Keith, I'm a first aider. May I help you? Are you okay? Tapping the collarbone. We're going to open the airway up. So we fully open the airway. We're going to do a breathing check for 10 seconds. Put your ear down. Look down the chest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're still at this point going to have to activate the emergency services either on your phone, put it in speakerphone, or ask somebody else. Can you go and dial 999, ask for an ambulance, tell them we're at Westside Centre, Colchester, and we've got a non-breathing adult and we're doing CPR, and come back and tell me what they say. But while you're doing that talking, you can start with the compressions. All we're doing exactly the same position, hands across into the breastbone, pushing down, and we're just carrying on doing those compressions. And we're doing exactly the same speed, 100 to 120 compressions per minute at a depth of 5 to 6 centimeters. So the compression side is the same, but you just don't do the breast side. Only thing with it, if you want to, you can count out loud, or you don't have to. If you're happy with the pace that you're going through, that's absolutely fine. If not, you might want to count to 30 and back to 0, or you might just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and back. Whatever you find is easier, just to keep that pace going. And you just keep going with that until the AD arrives, or until the EMS arrive, or you hand over to a second rescuer. In this scenario, the child's run along, clutching its chest, and collapsed. So he's ended up on the floor here. Now, cardiac arrest within children is uncommon. Normally what would happen is there's something else that would cause the person to need CPR. Now, maybe he has had cardiac arrest and the heart has stopped beating, but normally with the child, something else would trigger it. It could be a respiratory problem, or it could be other illness or condition. So what we need to do to start with is find out what's actually happened. We need to find out if the child is breathing. Now, before you're approaching any child, we need to look at consent as well. If there's somebody there, then we need to ask maybe a parent or a guardian or a teacher, can I help your child? If not, we can also talk to the child himself. So the whole time, because it may be the heart has not stopped beating. It may be he can still hear us. So what we want to do is talk to him the whole time. Introduce yourself so we can find out what's actually happened. So as you're approaching, we would say, hello, my name's Keith. I'm a first aider. May I help you? Now, if you know his name, you can refer to him by name. It may well be people you're looking after. You don't know their name. Once you've done the initial introduction, then give him a little tap on the collarbone. Are you okay? Are you okay? We've got no response at all. Because we've got no response here, then we need to next find out whether he's breathing. Before we start any first aid, we're going to put gloves on, if possible. In a scenario like this, if you're out and about, then you may not have gloves. You may have sent someone for help. You may have sent somebody to get the first aid kit. But obviously, for keeping things right now, we're going to have the gloves on. So we've introduced ourselves. Next thing to do is open the airway. To do this, we're doing the head tilt, chin lift. Take one hand and put it onto the forehead, and on the other hand, the bony part of the chin. And then we're going to tilt the head back. We're just going to open the mouth to have a quick look inside the mouth, make sure there's nothing obvious in there. And then we're going to put our ear down, and we're going to look, listen, and feel for signs of breathing for up to 10 seconds. So 1, 2, 9, 10. We've got no breathing. So what we're doing is we're looking, listening, and feeling for signs of breathing. So you'll be able to feel some of the breaths against your cheek. You'll be able to hear it. You'll also be able to see the stomach and the chest going up and down. Now, this point is quite important. If we're on our own, we're dealing with a child, they're not breathing, we must do 1 minute of CPR and then go for help. So obviously we've called for help. If there's nobody else about or no one's come back for your, as a response to your shout for help, we must do 1 minute of CPR and then go for help. And the reason for this is that we're trying to get the body's oxygen and the circulation going within the body. So by doing 1 minute of CPR, if it is a respiratory linked problem, it may well be we can bring him back to life. If at the point you've done 1 minute of CPR and there's no joy, you would need to leave him and go and get help. It's crucial we get the emergency services and defibrillation and advanced drugs here. So for this scenario, we found out he's not breathing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to switch over to a mannequin. We're going to show exactly how we deliver the breaths and the compressions. We found out he's not breathing. So the next thing we need to do is deliver 5 breaths. In order to get the breaths in, what we need to do is to open up the airway. So the same as we did before, tilt the head back, the head tilt, chin lift. We need to squeeze the nose. The reason we do that is if we're going to blow our breath into the mouth, then we don't want it coming straight back out through the nose. We're going to squeeze the nose, seal our mouth around their mouths. Now, if you've got a barrier, use it. You can use face shield at this time. However, in this example here, you've been out and about and maybe haven't got a first aid kit available to you. What we're going to do is then blow 5 breaths in. Now these breaths are just for up to a second, just until we see the chest rising. We're not trying to blow as much air in as possible. It's just to get some air into the lungs to try and stimulate some breathing and also get some oxygen into the system. So squeeze the nose with the head tilted back and 5 breaths. The next thing we need to do is compressions. Now these are very similar to an adult. However, we don't need to use 2 hands to push down. With this we can just use 1 hand. So what we're doing is we're pushing down on this part of the hand here, on the heel of the hand, straight in the centre of the chest. And we're pushing down at least 1/3 the depth of the chest. Now this, doing it by 1/3 allows for the different sizes of child. So we're not saying, like with adults, 5 to 6 centimetres. It's just a judgment call. This is quite a hard amount of pressure you need to push down on. So hand onto the chest, shoulder straight above, and then the other hand, you can support it on your arm. It doesn't really matter too much what you're doing with that. You just need to get these compressions done effectively. So 30 compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 30. With the compressions, we're pushing down and up with equal amounts, because what we need to do is we need to force the blood out of the heart, so when we let go, allow the blood to come back in as well. We're doing compressions at a ratio of 100 to 120 per minute. That's nearly 2 a second. So by pushing down on the chest, we're getting the blood pumping around the body. So the next thing we need to do is the breaths. And this time we're just doing 2 breaths. So tilt the head back, squeeze the nose. 2 breaths, 30 compressions. And we were carrying this on a ratio of 30 compressions to 2 breaths. Remember, we're doing it for 1 minute unless help has arrived in that time. If help hasn't arrived, we must go and get help. That delivering CPR to a child is going to be very, very distressing. But you will be okay. You will manage to do it. Afterwards, you're going to be very understandably upset. But it's so important that you have a go and you do it. If this child's heart has stopped, which is in this scenario, if you don't do CPR, the chances of survival are very, very low. So we must make sure that we do effective CPR. We shout as loud as we can for help. We get people around to help us. If we're tired, we can hand over to a second rescuer if there's somebody else available there. And when the paramedics do arrive, we give them as much information as possible. How long you've been doing CPR for, or any other information about the child. Also, when you get to this state, obviously it's very upsetting for people around. It may well be that you need in a school like this, you may well need to talk to the other children who might well have witnessed it, but also the teachers in this environment. The definition of infant CPR is from age birth to 1 year old. Now, if we're delivering CPR to an infant, it's going to be a lot different to dealing with an older child or with an adult. Here we're doing something very, very precious, very, very small. So it's going to be a very tough thing for you to do. But the idea of training and learning about infant CPR is that if you ever were in a situation where you had to deliver CPR to an infant, your training is in your brain, you've been programmed, and you'll hopefully be able to deliver that. So first of all, we're dealing with sort of the initial scene safety and the permission. Now, with the infant, obviously they can't ask you back, but still communicate with them. You can still ask them and talk to the baby, because what we're trying to do is get a response from them. So they're not going to be talking back, obviously. They're going to give you other signs. Maybe you might see twitches, you might see movement. So when we're assessing for response, then we can get those sort of responses back. As far as permission goes, if the parent or guardian is there, then you can ask the question, I'm a first aider, may I help your baby? And they can give you the consent to actually help. Then it gives you consent direct. If you are looking after someone's child and there is no parent or guardian there, you would have what's called implied consent, because I'm sure if that parent knew what was happening, they would want you to deliver CPR. So the first thing we need to do is obviously make sure the scene is safe. Now, when we're dealing with CPR, on this example here in the training environment, we're doing it on the tabletop. Now, that would work fine. It's on a solid, firm surface, but we could also do it on the floor. We could do it in your arm to a certain extent, because of the weight of the baby, will be less efficient. But if we needed to then move the baby to the ambulance, we could carry on doing CPR while moving them to the ambulance to save more time. So we're now going to look at the process for delivering CPR to an infant. So the first thing is we've asked the parent, or we've given a little tap, and also a tap on the feet. So that's a very good way of trying to get a response. Trying to ask them if they're okay. Just maybe get a response. In this example, we have no response. So we need to try and find out whether they're breathing. When you open the airway on a baby, it's a little bit different from that of an older child or an adult, because the airway itself is not fully developed yet. So if you were to open the airway fully and tilt the head right back, like you would on an adult CPR, what actually is going to happen, you will open the airway, but then you're going to close it again. It's like a garden hose. If you take a garden hose and water's flowing, and then you just bend that hose slowly, eventually it's going to crease. And at that point, no water's going to come out. And the airway is very, very similar. So what we do is we need to just move the head back into what's called a neutral position. Not overextend it, because that's going to stop the airway. Not leave it down, because that won't be open. So just keeping that in nice level form. So with the mannequins like this, if you open them too far, you'll find that you can't get the air in there anyway. So the mannequins are also designed to allow the air to go just in when the airway is open correctly. So we need to find out if they're breathing. So it's head tilt, chin lift. So fingers on the top of the forehead, under the bony part of the chin. Tilt the head back into that neutral position. You pop your ear down there, and you're doing a breathing check for 10 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've counted to 10. We now know the infant is not breathing. Now, if you came across this situation, the first thing you're going to do is shout for help. But let's just assume in this example here, we're on our own. So what the idea here is a little bit different from with adult CPR, is we would do 1 minute of CPR first and then go for help. The reason for this is we're dealing with a respiratory problem here, normally with infants and children. So hopefully, by delivering CPR for that 1 minute period, the infant will come round. So we don't really want to waste too much time calling the ambulance at that point, but we must then, after that minute, call the emergency services. Now, if somebody else was there, obviously send them to call the emergency services, tell them exactly what you're dealing with. You've got a non-breathing infant and you're delivering CPR. That'll put the call at an absolute maximum priority, and hopefully we'll help you there within 4 to 8 minutes. So once we've established that they're not actually breathing, then we need to deliver breaths. Now, with breaths, you can use face shields, you can use pocket masks, things like this, or you can go straight down onto the mouth. Now, we'll demonstrate going straight down onto the mouth to show you how that happens. But if you're using a pocket mask, then you can pop the mask over. Normally, we'd put a mask on this way round, but with infants, these masks are designed to fit the other way round. So if you pop that over, it's going right over the face. So therefore, you've got a good seal around the whole of the mouth and the nose, and you can put the breath, keep a good barrier between yourself and the infant. Now, the key thing with doing the breaths is we're putting the breaths in, and we will seal our mouth around the mouth and the nose, not just the mouth. Now, with older children and adults, yes, you can squeeze the nose quite easily, but with an infant, you won't be able to do that. So to start with, just tilt the head back into that neutral position. We're sealing around, and the actual area is right around the mouth and the nose, so that we get a good seal. And then you're putting the breath in. And you're not doing the breath the same as you would with an older child, because the lung size is much smaller. So it's just a gentle puff until you see the chest rise. And we're delivering 5 breaths. So we're delivering breath, 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 and breath. And when you put the air in, allow the air to come out, and then put the next breath in. So that way we can flush the baby, their respiratory system, with as much oxygen as possible. So we're just going to run through that side, and then we'll show you how to do the chest compressions. So each time I'm doing the breaths, I'm just checking, looking down, as in the corner of my eye, I can see the chest rising and falling. So I know the breath's going in. Also, I'll be able to feel the breath coming out from my cheek. So you know that air has gone in. So once you've done the 5 breaths, we then move down to chest compressions. Now we do this a little bit different. We're just using 2 fingers. So you can use 2 fingers on either hand, and we're pushing it just in the centre of the breastbone, exactly in the same place as we would with adults. But with the infants, you can look at it with the line between the nipples on the infant. So we're just literally popping the fingers on, and we're pushing down about a third of the depth of the chest. Now, pushing down a third of the depth of the chest is quite a severe depth to push down, but we need to do this to compress the heart. And again, same with older children, is we need to ensure that the chest has been risen back up. So we must make sure the heart is refilled with blood. So doing the breaths, we're doing 30 compressions, and we're doing them at the same speed, 100 to 120 compressions per minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. We delivered the 30 compressions, we then do 2 breaths. So it'd be 2 breaths, 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 compressions. And what we're doing that just for 1 minute. So we're just running that through, and then if we're on our own or help hasn't obviously arrived, then we must make that call. So put the airway into neutral position, deliver 2 breaths. So once you've gone through the cycle of 30 to 32, and we've then activated emergency services, then we will continue the CPR process until the emergency services arrive, and they tell you to stop or they tell you to hand over. So once they get here, they will want you to carry on. Now, if it happened inside and you heard the ambulance outside, then you can carry the baby out to the ambulance. That's possible as well. Or you can wait for the emergency services to come in. If you are carrying them outside, you need to then carefully pick up the infant, and you can rest it on your arm and still be able to deliver the CPR compressions and the breaths successfully while walking to the ambulance. But that's something you need to decide on the time, which is best for you in that instance. So to summarise, infant CPR is very, very sensitive. It's a very, very worrying thing to do, even in a simulation environment in the classroom. It's quite upsetting in what you're doing, but it's good at skill to learn. And the information that you've got there is being programmed into your head that hopefully you won't ever have to do this. If you ever did, the information is there for easy recall. What we're going to do now is look at what to do if you find someone who you suspect has drowned. This person is unresponsive and not breathing. Safety is the first concern, so do not put yourself or others at risk. We start this scenario at the point where the victim of drowning are on their back, as there are other courses on water rescue. Water can be very cold even on a hot day. There may be obstructions under the water, soft beds, or strong currents. When someone's being pulled out of the water, if they're not breathing, this is going to be different from somebody in an office situation who's not breathing. This is because in an office situation, when they're not breathing, it's most likely a result of a cardiac problem, where if someone has drowned, it's more likely they've stopped breathing because of a respiratory problem. Treatment for a patient who has drowned and no breathing is slightly different from standard CPR. If someone else is there, send them to call the EMS. If not, continue care. First, open the airway and check for breathing for 10 seconds. If you cannot detect breathing, rest your breath first. Then 30 compressions and 2 breaths for 1 minute. If you're alone, at this point you would leave and go to call for help. This is called the call fast approach. Continue CPR with 30 compressions and 2 breaths until the EMS arrive and tell you to stop or to help them. The reason we deliver 5 breaths first is that we're trying to start them breathing again first, and then we move on to CPR if they do not show signs of any life. It may be this person has just stopped breathing and they may have a weak pulse at this time, so the 5 breaths may start their breathing again. Finally, it's worth noting that the sequence for drowning is the same as that for children from age 1 to 18. We've spoken about CPR and what we're doing until the AED arrives. What we're going to do now is just briefly look at what an AED unit is and why we want to use one. An AED is an automatic external defibrillator. One of the myths of an AED unit is that it actually starts the heart. But what is actually happening is it interrupts the abnormal twitching of the heart that hopefully then the pacemakers will fire and restart the heart in a normal beating pattern. When someone needs CPR, the heart doesn't always just stop. Electrical activity in the heart can cause it to quiver. This is not producing any meaningful pulse. By delivering a shock across the heart, we interrupt this electrical activity and hope that naturally it will start beating normally again. AED units will only advise of a shock if they detect what's called a shockable rhythm. A shockable rhythm would be when the heart goes into VF, ventricular fibrillation, or pulseless VT, ventricular tachycardia. Now, from a first aid point of view, we don't need to worry about the difference because the unit will detect it and decide if it's shockable or not shockable. If it's not shockable, this would mean that the heart is beating normally, called a normal sinus rhythm, or it's flatline, called a systole. There are many different types of AED unit, but they all work in the same way, and they all talk you through using them. Some you have to push a shock button when advised. These are called semi-automatic AEDs, and the others may automatically shock. These are called automatic AEDs. In the coming videos, we're going to look at AEDs in more depth and how to use them. AED is an automatic external defibrillator. Now, there are loads and loads of different brands of AED out there. They will all look different. However, they're all basically the same and can be pretty much cut down into around about 3 main types of AED. Now, all AED units will talk to you. They'll all have an on-off button. They'll all have a shock button, unless they're an automatic one. But what we're going to do here is look at this range. This is the Heartsign range of AED units. Now, the first one we're going to look at is the Heartsign 350, because this is what's called a semi-automatic AED unit. Once you turn the unit on, it will talk you through what to do. You put the pads on. It will do an analysing side where it's checking to see whether it's a shockable rhythm, whether the Heartsign AED is going to work. If it is, you need to physically push that button. So it will say, push this flashing orange button. So when you push that button, or before you push that button, you need to make sure no one is touching the patient, everyone's clear, and you can push the button, and that will deliver the shock. Now that's with semi-automatic. There's also the automatic version. Now, this is an automatic, the HeartSign 360. And this doesn't have a shock button, but it does have a flashing light there. So with this unit, you put it on, it goes through the analysing cycle, but then it will say shock advised, and it will count down to the shock. And in that time, you need to make sure no one is touching the patient, because this will shock automatically. Now, there's a third version we've got here, which is the HeartSign 500, but this comes under the group of AEDs, which has CPR help. So with this unit, it will tell you whether you're pushing too fast or too slow. So as it gives you a voice feedback on how effective your CPR is. So it's a very, very good unit. And also from the front of the unit, you'll be able to see, we keep it in the green, it can be very effective CPR. So although these other units all work the same, this one will actually give you positive feedback on your CPR quality. And again, other brands have a similar type of features on them, but not all of them. The final thing we're going to look at with this one is another system. We just open this up. This is what they call a gateway unit. It's been added to the unit. This is this small unit at the top here. And this will take data from the unit. So it's a very easy way of monitoring what state the unit's in. So this will tune in on Wi-Fi, and it will detect whether the unit's functional. And there's lots of different systems you can add to this. You can take data off of the unit very simply. All of these units you can take data off. This is a very fast, easy way of doing it. And also you can have an admin dashboard, and it'll even tell you things and give you alerts to say when the pads need changing, when to do checks on the AED unit as well. All this is simply this clips on top of these units. So it just clips on the top, and you see the connections here. It clips back on the top. There's a small charger point there, which can directly access the data off of the unit as well. And it's a very, very simple, easy addition to make an AED unit a lot better. Now, this unit here will only work on these units, and you can then update the case so it fits in a lot better. But gateway units, or anything that communicates through Wi-Fi or 3G, will help to manage the AED to make sure it's fully functional when you need to use it. One situation you may have to deal with is dealing with someone who's choking. Now, choking is divided into two main groups. There's mild choking and severe choking. Now, mild choking is where you have a blockage in the throat, however, air can still pass through. So this person is going to be coughing, they're going to be breathing heavily, they're going to be in a lot of distress, but the air can pass through. So you will hear them making noise, you will hear them coughing, they may be able to talk. An example of a mild obstruction could be a fishbone that's caught in the throat. The procedures are to try and calm them down the best you can, allow them to cough, and hopefully they'll expel the object. If they don't, then you're going to need to get to medical help and call the EMS, because you're not going to be able to take that obstruction out of their throat. So the next group are the severe airway obstructions. Now, severe airway obstruction is a complete blockage in the throat. It could be that you're in a restaurant and you've eaten a very large lump of steak, just swallowed it, which often happens where people are laughing or talking and eating at the same time. That can cause an obstruction, or rushing their food. If the lump of steak got stuck into the throat, there's no air passing. So with this person, they're not going to be able to cough. They're going to be very, very distressed. They are going to be passing out in a very short space of time, just a minute or just over a minute. And this person is going to need help immediately. So with this person, we're going to need to approach them, get their consent. Now, one of the things you can say to someone is, are you choking? It might seem a bit of an odd thing to say, but the reason we say, are you choking, is we want them to get a reaction from it. If they say yes, it means that they're not choking in the sense of the procedure we're going to be talking about next. If they can't answer you, then you're going to have to look for other signs. Now, one of the universal signs of choking is hands to the throat. If you say, "Are you choking?" they might nod, or they might indicate you to come over. Anything like this. This is all consent. If we go through within first aid, you still have to go through your first aid cycle, your consent side. But in order to gain that consent and know they're choking, it's not only verbal, they're not going to be able to talk to you, it can be other signs you look for. What we're going to do is do two key procedures. The first one will be 5 back slaps, and the second one will be 5 abdominal thrusts, and then we repeat that. So with the demonstration of how to deal with choking, the first things you're looking for are signs. So if Matt was choking, he'd be having his hands to the throat, and then I would ask, "Are you choking?" Now he can't answer me, so he's going to nod. You'll see in his face, you'll see he's turning red, he's trying to breathe, he's feeling very distressed. So what you can then do is move through to the back blows. The first thing you do is take one arm and just lay it forward, just leaning forward slightly, and we're going to deliver 5 back blows as individual blows between the shoulder blades, and it'll literally be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Between each one, I'm looking down to see if the object has been expelled. If it has, I'll then stop and allow it to cough. What I then do, if that hasn't worked, I then need to do abdominal thrusts. So I need to get the thumb side of my fist in against, just above his belly button, in here. So you're not pushing on the rib cage, you're doing below the rib cage. The other hand is going right the way round, and then we're giving an inward and upward motion. So it'll be literally in like this. Now I won't do this fully because it will could cause him injury. So it'll be literally inward, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if that hasn't worked, I can leave my arm there and go back to 1, check, 2, check, 3, check, 4, check, 5. So it's 5 back slaps, 5 abdominal thrusts, and then you repeat that until the object comes out or he becomes unconscious. One advantage of having your arm round here is if he did become unconscious, you can lower him into the ground. And once you lower him to the ground, you would then start CPR at the chest compression stage. You know he's not breathing, he's been choking. So you start CPR at chest compression stage because the trapped air in his lungs, as you push down on the chest, the hope is that trapped air in the lungs will force against the object and expel it out the body. Finally, if you had to do the abdominal thrust on a pregnant lady, then you can't do it down into the stomach, so you do what's called chest thrust. So this would be exactly where we would do the CPR compressions. It's fist side straight in the middle of the breastbone, and you would pull through onto the chest in the same manner as you would down on the stomach, but we push it on the chest. This is the only option you've really got because there's no other way round of doing it. If you couldn't get your arms around someone's waist, then again, you can move up here and do chest thrusts if you needed to. are two different types of obstruction that can be associated with choking. The first is a mild airway obstruction. This could be a fishbone or a small object that's been caught in the throat. It's uncomfortable, may be painful, and they may be distressed. The easiest way to find out if they can breathe is to ask them if they're choking. If they can talk, then they can breathe. So the best action is just to keep them calm, encourage them to cough, which is normally enough to clear it. You can look in their mouth, and if the obstruction is obvious, then you could remove it, but don't put your fingers deep into their mouth. A severe airway obstruction is far more serious, and it means that something is stuck in their throat, completely blocking it, and they're unable to breathe, talk, or cough, and they will eventually become unconscious if the object is not cleared. So we need to do what we can to clear it. When dealing with choking on a child, it's basically the same as doing choking on an adult, but there are some different considerations you need to take into account. To start with, the child's going to be a lot smaller. Because the child's smaller, you may need to kneel down behind the child in order to deliver the back blows and the abdominal thrusts. Also, the child's going to be very distressed, and you're going to be distressed as well. Therefore, you may find the need to be quite forceful. That child may try and turn and fight against you while you're doing this, but you must get this obstruction out. To deal with severe choking, you should stand behind them, slightly to one side, and ask them to lean forwards while you support their upper body with one hand. Take the other hand and provide 5 sharp back blows between the shoulder blades using the heat of your hand, checking between each one to see if the obstruction has been cleared. If the back blows haven't worked, you'll need to perform abdominal thrusts. To do this, we put both arms around the casualty and make a fist with one hand and place it in between their belly button and the bottom of their breastbone. Place your other hand on top of the fist and pull sharply inwards and upwards 5 times. Check each time to see if the obstruction was cleared. We perform abdominal thrusts to force air that's trapped in the lungs against the obstruction to hopefully force it out. If the obstruction remains, you'll need to repeat the 5 back blows and 5 abdominal thrusts, checking between each to see if the obstruction has been cleared. If you cannot get the obstruction to clear, call the emergency services if you haven't already and continue until they arrive. It may be possible to have a mobile phone on speakerphone so you can keep them updated. If the child loses consciousness, they will fall to the floor. Take care that you don't get injured while trying to catch them, but with a child it may be easy to guide them down. If they're unconscious and not breathing, you'll need to begin CPR. If you provide abdominal thrusts and successfully remove the obstruction, sit the casualty down and keep them calm. They will need to be checked out by a medical professional to make sure that the thrusts have not caused any injury. When an infant is choking, it's a very worrying situation for everyone. By their very nature, infants are more likely to choke on small food or small objects than adults, and it's important to act quickly. If an infant has a mild obstruction in the throat, there is still going to be some air going through and they should be able to cough. But if you're dealing with a severe obstruction, where either food or an object has become lodged in the throat, there is no way any air can get through. The infant will be very distressed and unable to breathe, cry, or cough. So once you've checked that they're not breathing, you'll need to lay the infant face down along your thigh, usually while sitting down. Use one hand to support their head, and the other hand you can provide up to 5 back blows between the shoulder blades using the heel of your hand. Checking between each blow to see if you've cleared the obstruction. But if nothing comes out, turn the child over, face upwards, and laying on your leg so you can check their mouth. If there's an obvious obstruction, remove it with your fingers, but never perform blind finger sweeps, as you may push the obstruction further into their throat. If the obstruction is still in place, you will need to perform chest thrusts, and for this, the infant should still be laying on your leg facing upwards. Put 2 fingers on the lower part of the breastbone, 1 finger's breadth below the nipple line, and push inwards and downwards towards the infant's head. Do this up to 5 times and try to clear the object. If you've been unable to remove the obstruction, ask someone to call the emergency services. And if you're alone, take the infant with you while you make the call. You will need to repeat 5 back blows, check the infant's mouth again, followed by another 5 chest thrusts. Repeat if necessary until the object clears or the emergency services arrive. If the infant becomes unconscious at any time, be ready to open the airway and check for breathing. And if they're not breathing, you will need to begin CPR.
Uh-oh. See you later.